stories I'm about to share were sent to me through anonymous emails from people I'll never meet, with names I'll never know. They asked me to tell their stories because they can't, because they're too afraid, because no one believed them the first time. Now legally, I gotta say this. I can't verify any of this. I don't know if these people are real. I don't know if these events actually happened. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. I'm just the messenger here, but what I can promise you is that every story I share gets darker than the last one. Every video pushes further than the one before, because that's what these people asked for. They wanted someone to understand what they went through, and now you're about to understand too. We swipe right on strangers and call it fate. We meet people who curate perfection on screens and hope they're real when the lights go down. But sometimes, the person across the table isn't who they said they were. Sometimes, they're not even who they think they are. And sometimes, by the time you realize something's wrong, you're already too deep to simply walk away. The scariest part about monsters is they don't look like monsters when you meet them. They look like your type. They say the right things. They make you feel seen. They make you feel special. And that's how they get close enough to show you who they really are. By then, it's too late to just walk away. Alright, let's get into the first story. And remember, someone lived through this. I met him at a coffee shop in Portland on a Tuesday morning in late October of 2019. He was sitting by the window with a camera around his neck, one of those expensive ones that real photographers carry. I noticed him because he kept glancing up from his laptop, and when our eyes met the third time, he smiled. Not a creepy smile, just confident. The kind that makes you wonder if maybe this is how people actually meet in real life, not just on apps. He walked over, asked if I minded him sitting down, said the place was packed, which it wasn't, but I didn't mind. His name was Derek. He told me he was a freelance photographer, mostly editorial stuff for magazines I'd actually heard of. He showed me his portfolio on his phone, and I'll admit, I was impressed. The photos were good, really good. We talked for 2 hours. He asked about my work, my hobbies, what I did for fun, normal questions. I told him I was a graphic designer, worked remotely, lived alone in a studio apartment in Northwest. He asked if I'd ever modeled. I laughed because I'm 5'4" and definitely not model material, but he said he wasn't talking about that kind of modeling. He needed someone for a portrait series he was working on. Natural light, candid shots, nothing weird. I said maybe. He said he'd love to show me his studio. I gave him my number. 3 days later, he texted, asked if I wanted to grab dinner. We met at a Thai place downtown, and everything felt easy. He was charming, funny, asked the right questions. By the end of the night, I'd agreed to come by his studio that weekend, just to see the space. He said, no pressure. Saturday came. His studio was in a converted warehouse in Southeast, the kind of building that looks sketchy from the outside but is full of artists and startups inside. He buzzed me in, led me up 3 flights of stairs. The studio was bright, clean, full of white walls and expensive equipment. Felt professional, felt safe. He showed me his work. Prints hanging on the walls, shots of people I didn't recognize but who all looked stunning in his lens. He asked if I was comfortable taking a few test shots, just to see how the light worked with my features, he said. I said okay. He positioned me by the window, adjusted the blinds, told me to relax, be natural. Click, click, click. The sound of the shutter was rhythmic, almost soothing. He asked me to turn my head, to look away, to close my eyes. I did. Then he asked me to come back the next day, said he wanted to try something different. I said sure. Sunday, same building, same studio, but this time when I walked in, something felt off. The energy was different. He seemed more focused, more intense. He asked me to sit on a stool in the corner, the same corner where, I suddenly noticed, every single portrait on the wall had been taken. Same angle, same light, same pose, and then I noticed something else. Every woman in those photos looked like me. Not exactly, but close enough. Same height, same hair color, same build, different faces, but the similarities were impossible to ignore. I asked him about it, tried to keep my voice light, casual. He said he had a type, said all artists do, laughed like it was nothing, but his laugh didn't reach his eyes. He started taking photos again, faster this time, moving around me in circles, getting closer. I could hear him breathing. The shutter clicks became frantic, desperate. He kept saying perfect, perfect, just like that. I stood up, said I needed to leave. He didn't stop me, but as I walked toward the door, He said something that made my stomach drop. "You'll come back." They always do. I never went back. But 2 weeks later, I found his Instagram. He'd posted a photo of me, one I didn't remember him taking. The caption said, "Number 12. I blocked him, changed my number. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder who number 13 is, and if she knows what she's walking into. I moved to Austin in the summer of 2021 because I got a job offer I couldn't refuse and an apartment I could barely afford. The place was a one-bedroom in South Congress, small but clean, with hardwood floors and windows that actually opened. The landlord was a guy named Marcus who lived in the building, just 2 floors up. He seemed fine, mid-30s, friendly, said if I ever needed anything to just knock on his door. The first month was great. I was settling in, making friends, exploring the city. Marcus would text every now and then to check if everything was working okay. The fridge, the AC, the water pressure, normal landlord stuff. Then the texts started coming more often. "Hey, just checking in. How's everything? Saw you leave this morning. Hope you have a great day. Let me know if you need anything. I'm always here." I didn't think much of it. He was just being attentive, I told myself. But then I started noticing things. My mail would be sitting on my kitchen counter when I got home, even though I always grabbed it from the mailbox myself. Small things in my apartment would be moved, nothing major. A coffee mug on the wrong side of the sink. A book I swear I left on the nightstand now sitting on the couch. I thought I was losing my mind. One night in late August, I came home after drinks with coworkers around 11 p.m. I unlocked my door, walked in, and immediately smelled cologne. Not mine, someone else's. Fresh, like someone had just been there. I checked every room, closets, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. Nothing, but the smell was everywhere. I texted Marcus, asked if maintenance had been in my apartment. He responded within seconds, said no one had been there. Asked if I was okay, said he could come down and check if I wanted. I said no, locked my door, pushed a chair under the handle. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. "I heard you come home late. You should be more careful. Austin isn't always safe at night." I started changing my routine, coming home at different times, not telling anyone my schedule, but Marcus always seemed to know. He'd text right after I got home, ask how my day was, mention something I'd done that day, like he'd seen me, which, technically, he could have. He lived upstairs, but it felt wrong, felt invasive. I bought a cheap security camera off Amazon and set it up facing my front door. 3 days later, I checked the footage. Marcus had been in my apartment twice. Once in the morning after I left for work, once at night while I was in the shower. He had a key. Of course he did. He was the landlord. I watched him walk through my space slowly, carefully, like he was savoring it. He touched my things, sat on my couch, looked through my mail, opened my closet. The video made me want to vomit. I packed a bag that night and stayed with a friend. Filed a police report the next day. They said without proof of physical harm or explicit threat, there wasn't much they could do. Told me to break my lease, move out, start over. I did. Lost my security deposit, paid an early termination fee, and found a new place across town within a week. But before I left, I went back one last time to grab the rest of my stuff. Marcus was standing in my empty living room when I walked in. Said he heard I was leaving, said he was disappointed, said he thought we had something special. I didn't respond, just grabbed my boxes and walked out. But as I reached my car, I looked up at the building. He was standing in the window of my old apartment, watching. He raised his hand, waved. I still have nightmares about that wave, about how casual it was, like he knew I'd never really be free of him, like he knew where I lived now too. His name was Ethan, and I met him on Hinge in March of 2018. We matched on a Thursday, talked for 3 weeks straight, and decided to meet in person. He lived in Denver, I lived in Boulder, close enough to make it easy, far enough to keep it interesting. Our first date was at a brewery, and it went so well we stayed until closing. He was smart, funny, had a good job in tech, and didn't set off any red flags. We started seeing each other every weekend. By June, we'd been together 3 months, and he suggested a road trip, said he wanted to show me Montana, this little cabin his family owned near Glacier National Park, just the two of us, a long weekend away from everything. I said yes. We left on a Friday morning. The drive was supposed to take 8 hours, but Ethan said he knew a shortcut through back roads that would save us time. I didn't question it. I trusted him. That was my first mistake. 3 hours in, we turned off the highway onto a 2-lane road. that cut through farmland and forests. No gas stations, no rest stops, just empty road and trees. Ethan seemed happy, humming along to music, one hand on the wheel, the other on my knee. Everything felt fine. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and declined it. It rang again. He declined again. The third time, he turned it off completely. I asked if everything was okay. He said it was work stuff, nothing to worry about. But his mood had shifted. He wasn't humming anymore. His jaw was tight. He started driving faster. I asked where we were. He said we were almost there. But the GPS on my phone showed nothing but blank green space. No roads, no landmarks, just forest. We drove for another hour. The sun started setting. I tried to make conversation, but Ethan barely responded, just kept staring at the road, gripping the wheel too hard, knuckles white. When we finally stopped, it wasn't at a cabin. It was a clearing in the woods. No building, no sign of civilization, just dirt and trees and silence. I asked what we were doing here. Ethan got out of the car without answering, opened the trunk, started pulling out camping gear. I didn't know he'd packed a tent, sleeping bags, a cooler. I said I thought we were staying in a cabin. He said the cabin wasn't available anymore. Said this was better. Said it would be romantic, but nothing about the way he was acting felt romantic. He wouldn't look at me, wouldn't explain, just set up the tent in silence while I stood there feeling my stomach twist into knots. Night fell fast. Ethan built a fire. We sat across from each other, the flames between us, and I realized I didn't know this person at all. He wasn't the man I'd been dating for 3 months. He was someone else. Something else. I told him I wanted to leave. He said we couldn't. Said the roads were too dangerous at night. Said we'd leave in the morning. But the way he said it didn't sound like a suggestion. It sounded like a decision. I didn't sleep. I stayed in the tent, fully dressed, clutching my phone even though there was no signal, listening to every sound outside. Ethan sat by the fire all night. I could see his shadow through the tent fabric, just sitting there, staring into the flames. At dawn, I unzipped the tent and walked out, told him I was leaving, with or without him. He stood up slowly, looked at me for a long time, and then finally nodded, said okay, said he'd drive me back. The ride home was silent. He dropped me off at my apartment in Boulder 6 hours later. I got out without saying goodbye. He didn't try to stop me. 2 weeks later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a photo of the clearing where we'd camped, just dirt and trees, but someone had spray-painted words on a rock. She stayed. I never found out who sent it. I never saw Ethan again, but sometimes I think about that text, about what would have happened if I hadn't insisted on leaving, about the cabin that never existed, about the girl in the message who wasn't me, about the girl who stayed. I was 26 when I moved to Philadelphia in the fall of 2017 for a nursing program at Temple. Finding an affordable place was nearly impossible, so when I saw a listing for a basement apartment in Fishtown at half the going rate, I jumped on it. The landlord was an older man named Richard, who lived upstairs with his wife. They seemed normal, quiet. He said they barely used the basement anymore, and they were happy to rent it out to a responsible young woman. The apartment was small but had everything I needed. A bedroom, a tiny bathroom, a kitchenette, separate entrance around the side of the house, privacy. I signed the lease the same day. The first few weeks were fine. I'd see Richard and his wife, Margaret. Occasionally when I came and went, they'd wave, smile, ask how school was going, standard landlord pleasantries. But I started noticing that Richard was always home, always watching from the window when I left, always on the porch when I came back. Margaret, on the other hand, I almost never saw. One night in late October, I heard them arguing upstairs, muffled voices through the ceiling. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was clear, angry, desperate, then silence, then footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps pacing back and forth for hours. The next morning, I saw Richard leaving the house with a large duffel bag. He loaded it into his trunk and drove off. Margaret wasn't with him. I didn't think much of it. People travel, people fight. It wasn't my business. But Margaret didn't come back. Days passed, then a week, then 2. I asked Richard once if she was visiting family. He said yes, said she'd be gone a while, said it was nothing to worry about, but his eyes were wrong, empty, like he was reading lines from a script. That same week, I started smelling something in my apartment, something sour and rotten, like old meat left in the sun. I checked the trash, the fridge, under the sink, nothing, but the smell got worse. It was coming from the walls, or maybe the floor. I couldn't tell. I texted Richard, said I thought there might be a dead animal in the crawl space or something. He came down within minutes, walked around sniffing the air, frowning, said he didn't smell anything, said maybe it was the pipes, said he'd check it out. He didn't. The smell got so bad I could barely sleep. I started spending nights at the library, studying until it closed, coming home only to shower and change. But one night, I forgot my keys and had to knock on Richard's door to ask for the spare. He answered wearing the same clothes he'd been wearing for days. His hair was greasy, his hands were shaking. He handed me the key without a word, but as I turned to leave, he grabbed my arm, squeezed it hard, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "You should move out." I pulled away, asked what he meant. He let go, stepped back, and closed the door in my face. I stood there for a full minute, heart hammering, before I went back downstairs. That night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The smell, the missing wife, the empty look in Richard's eyes. I called a friend from school, told her everything, and she said I needed to call the police. I said I didn't have proof of anything. She said the smell was enough. I didn't call, not yet, but I started packing, quietly, a little every day. Clothes, books, important documents. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was letting stress from school get to me, but deep down, I knew something was very, very wrong. 3 days later, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of scraping, metal on concrete, coming from somewhere close, too close. I turned on my phone, flashlight, and followed the sound. It was coming from behind the wall next to my bed, the wall that separated my bedroom from the rest of the basement. The part I'd never seen, the part Richard said was just storage. I pressed my ear against the wall, listened, and then I heard it, breathing, slow, labored, like someone was struggling to stay alive. I left my apartment that night and never went back. Stayed with my friend, called the police the next morning, told them everything. The smell, the missing wife, the sounds behind the wall. They got a warrant, searched the house, found Margaret in the basement. Behind that wall, she'd been there the whole time. Barely alive. Richard had been keeping her there, feeding her just enough to keep her breathing. Said she'd tried to leave him, said he couldn't let that happen. I found out later that the apartment was never legally supposed to be rented out. The basement wasn't up to code. Richard had done it off the books, cash only, no paper trail, because he needed someone down there, someone close enough to hear if Margaret made noise, someone who might think the smell was just an old building, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. He'd done it before. 3 times before, different tenants, different women, but I was the first one who called the police. Margaret survived. Richard didn't. He took his own life in jail before the trial. I never finished my program at Temple, moved back home, couldn't stay in Philadelphia, couldn't stop thinking about how thin that wall was, how close I'd been, how many nights I'd slept inches away from a woman dying on the other side, how easily it could have been me behind that wall instead. These stories found their way to me because the people who lived them needed to tell someone, needed to know they weren't crazy, that what happened to them was real. And now they've found you. If these stories found you, maybe yours will find me too. We keep swiping, keep meeting strangers, keep hoping the next one will be different. But sometimes, the person across the table isn't looking for love. They're looking for something darker, something that won't let go once it has you. Trust carefully. Leave quickly, and always, always listen to that voice in your head that says something's wrong, because it usually is. Stay safe out there.